I rise today to bring to the floor the House Joint Resolution 124. It is a continuing funding resolution for fiscal year 2015. Madam President, let me explain where we are. We're in the closing hours before the Senate takes a recess for the fall elections. In the middle of all that, on October 1st, our fiscal year begins. If we don't have a bridge between now and December 11th or in that, we could face a government shutdown. We do not want a government shutdown. We want to make sure that we could provide funding and make sure that the government will not be shut down, and that after the election we can return and do due diligence and pass this in a more comprehensive way. Our job as the Appropriations Committee in the Congress is to put money in the federal checkbook each year to keep the federal government functioning. People, the American people, want their government to work as hard as they do. They want us to combat the threats against the United States of America. They want us to honor our commitments to our veterans. They want us to meet the compelling human needs of the American people. And they want us to have an opportunity ladder so that the American people can have a fair shot. What we do, we provide funding 1 year at a time. September 30th is our fiscal New Year's Eve. October 1st is the first day of the fiscal year, and if Congress leaves before we pass the continuing resolution, the government could shut down. We don't want another government shutdown, and I believe that there is support on both sides of the aisle not to do that. We know from last year that it was a terrible situation, putting thousands of federal workers were paid not to work. Other personnel like FBI agents had to work for IOUs, even using their own money to put gas in their car as they pursued the people who wanted to undermine us. So we know we don't want a shutdown. What is our goal for this continuing resolution? To avoid a shutdown, but to do more than that, to do no harm to existing programs so that we can meet our compelling human needs, the national security needs of the United States of America, and continue those public investments in innovation that makes America the exceptional nation and often the indispensable nation. It allows us also to lay the groundwork for an omnibus funding bill in December, which would be a comprehensive funding bill including all 12 appropriations. Also, it gives the president the fiscal resources to protect the nation, to deal with ISIL, to make sure we support the needs of the Ukraine and NATO, and also to work on a global basis to stamp out Ebola. What I want to say to my colleagues who will look at this bill and scrutinize it, the continuing resolution is only from now to December 11th. Remember, it is a temporary stopgap bill. Also, it is at current levels of funding. So I want to say there are no new programs and there is no new funding. As I said, it meets these needs. I work very closely with my House counterpart, the distinguished gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Hal Rogers, the chair of the Appropriations bill in the House. We worked very hard to do bills where we thought we could bring individual ones to the nation. Well, it didn't work out that way because one party stopped me from bringing bills to the floor. I'm sorry we don't have that omnibus, but poison pill riders kept the Senate from considering appropriations bills to the floor and also demanding 60-vote thresholds. That's a debate for another day. So where are we in this continuing resolution? As I said, it keeps government running through December 11th, operating at the same amount of money as fiscal 2014 for the same items and the same programs and the same restrictions. People People might say, haven't things changed since last year? There are some technical adjustments that we do, but we just simply are extending what we have. And again, what we do here is help the president, though, with what has changed is 3 alarming threats that are facing us. Number one, this growing threat of an organization called ISIL. People say, are you talking about ISIS? No, I'm talking about ISIL because it goes beyond Syria, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. And what we have in here is the authority for the president to use Title 10 of the United States Code. What that does is allow the president to train and equip with proper vetting the moderates in the Syrian forces, the Syrian rebel forces. We also are supporting our president as he works with NATO and tries to deal with the Russian threat to the Ukraine. And then there's another grim and ghoulish thing going around in Africa, spreading, which is Ebola. What we are doing here is providing him, the president, with the resources to help Africa fight this problem, and at the same time, while we're fighting in Africa, make sure that NIH and FDA and CDC have the resources to fight with the issues here. I could elaborate on my bill more, on this bill more. I want you to know that we've come. The CR is bicameral. It's already passed the House. It's bipartisan. I've worked with my counterpart in the other party, Senator Shelby, who really has worked in a very rigorous way here, bringing the principles of fiscal conservatism, but civility, so we have this. But I know that there are other senators that want to debate, and I want them to have the opportunity to debate this bill, and I'll have more to say when there are not other waiting. So, Madam President, I want to yield the floor, but before I do, I'm going to thank Senator Shelby for the cooperation of his staff. We haven't always agreed on every content or the content, every line item. He is a very staunch fiscal conservative, but out of it all, working with civility, due diligence, absolute candor, I think we've been able to bring a bill to the floor, and I hope my members, I hope my colleagues in the Senate will pass this bill.